Okay. Can everyone hear me? Please respond in the chat if you can hear me. This is one of those things where I have been trying to futz around with all the additional nonsense in the back end for the past half hour, and I'm not sure if it's all worked. Let's take a look. All right. Hey there. Loud and clear. Perfect. Okay, so folks are coming in. That is actually good to see. Again, it is way too stressful, especially when I don't have a full-fledged streaming setup in order to get all of this going the same way that a lot of professionals do. I don't stream that often as it is, so I wanted again, it's always a bit of the webcam streaming setup. I really should do more here if I intend to do more live streams. Okay, everyone is coming in, and it's starting to be very good. I'm quite pleased with this. I'm just gonna adjust the webcam a little. All right, perfect. Like that a lot better. Okay. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for all the congratulations. I appreciate it. And yes, I am wearing my Rustin Kelly Dirt Emo shirt, which I got when I saw him at Shape for the Shape and Destroy tour. Okay, so before we get things started, a couple of ground rules for those of you who have not been to these streams before. Normally, I just want to go for a little bit of a preamble ahead of time, just talk about where things are right now, and then go on from there. I think some of that's going to be a factor of I didn't do a year-end stream specifically, so I kind of just want to talk about how things are going now for me, where things are, and what might happen in the future. It looks like we got about 50 people here coming in. I appreciate all of that. And again, I will say let's not do super chats yet, but they will be prioritized for answering questions if or when they come in. So we will have to see how that goes. Alrighty. So I'm gonna get a bit of water here because again, this was a headache and a half to get the audio right. I think something's off with my microphone that's just out of frame over here. So we will have to see how it goes. Let's start off with, again, I don't know if hitting the likes does anything with streams. Everyone says to do it. If you all want to hit the likes, that would be great. I would appreciate that. Beyond that, though, let's start off and talk a little bit about where things are within the first month so far of this year. Bit of a weird place, not gonna lie. There was a situation where both my best songs of the year and best albums of the year, both those videos got taken down. They are both restored. I'm very happy to see that. Now I'm back in regular production mode. My schedule's been a little bit more tightly regimented when it comes to the regular scheduled reviews. And I do have another video essay in which the script is 95% done, and I just need to get some progress there because that one will involve some collaboration. So I'm working in the process on that. But the weird thing is, I might have more time for that than I expected. And the big reason for that is the Universal TikTok beef. And that basically meant that Universal pulled a lot of their albums from regular rotation to get released in early February. Like, you take a look at the release schedule, there's not a lot of Universal acts that are there. And that makes things very interesting to see how long that little holdout is going to go. So I don't know what that's going to mean. I might mean I have a little bit more free time. That would be very pleasant. I would certainly not complain about that. In the meantime, though, I am very grateful again that I was able to get the 45,000. The last quarter of last year was so thrilling because I had a number of videos do as well as they could have possibly expected. I had the Bro Country video essay went about the closest thing to viral in the space I could hope for. It's got about 25,000 views, and that was really, really awesome. And again, given there was so much work that went into it, and it felt like it was described as a culmination by a lot of people, and that's kind of how it felt at the end of the day. Then year-end list, and then I had my little fun little roast video, which again, I wish those videos got a little more traction, but it's hard to galvanize roast in the general populace. We'll see where that goes. I might need to cut that up a little bit more. Beyond that, though, we're back in routine and we got some good stuff on the horizon. And I want to thank you all for sticking around this long. I've been doing this for over 10 years. And again, a lot of YouTubers have their entire life cycle of their channel coming and going while I'm still here. And again, I think it's just consistency and stubbornness, and that means the world. And it means the world that so many of you have stuck around and are joining me this early on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. like full disclosure, after this is done, I'm going to go for a walk outside because it is gorgeous. All righty. So, I'm gonna again, just to highlight that the super chats, I'm gonna be prioritizing those if they may come in. Don't feel obligated. It's tough times. I understand. I will be fine. But if y'all want to get involved, that would again be appreciated. And I'm going to take a look at the chat right now and see how things are going. Cruz Walden, to me, it's crazy as hell that you only have 45K subs after 10 years of content creation. The funny thing about that, I actually do want to speak on this a little. I've talked about this before, that so much of YouTube blowing up is playing into an algorithm, or if you have a content that is not well optimized to do well in the algorithm, you're going to struggle. I do not make algorithm based content. I think that there was a flaw in my own personal releases when I moved Billboard Breakdown to its own channel, which, side note, Billboard Breakdown's been going on since 2019. It's very deeply funny how many people don't know that, apparently, that I have not been still working on a regular series, and I've got like 270 videos on the other channel, that if you want to go watch Billboard Breakdown for the past several years, I'm still doing it. It was a tremendously funny surprise when not only did that, when Brad Taste of Music discovered that that video was now existing and though that channel was now existing, and you can go watch it through all my backlog. But that also got a nice little boost in subs to that channel. It's over 8,000 now, which is good to see. But the other thing that I want to highlight is that there's a lot of channels that have that added little boost of virality, and that just gets them over the hump. It gets them their baseline audience. And it's tough to see how much of that audience sticks around, because I know for a fact that I've got my plenty share of subscribers that are not going to reply or watch my content, sure, but I also think there's the element of, well, sometimes it's going to be what it is. Like, you're not always going to be able to get that same level of traction persistently. And I think the benefit of what I've been doing for as long as I have is I've got a dedicated audience, like all of y'all, like almost 100 of you just coming to hear me talk. Alrighty. Let's keep a look through here. I know you haven't seen Oppenheimer. Have you checked out the score? I've been curious about that. At some point, I just need to sit down and watch Oppenheimer. It's on my list, and again, it's in physics. So it should be up my alley. I just need to have a chance to do it. Okay. Let's keep going through here that I want to look at. What if you started a side series where you just ranted about the Raptors? Honestly, I don't think there's much to rant about. I do enough ranting about sports teams when I go to the gym. The thing with the Raptors this season, and the reason I have not talked as much around them, is because this was a contract year. The timelines for their core was never going to be the same, especially with Scotty Barnes taking up a really good role. I think the trade with the Knicks, moving OG Anunoby over there for Quickly and RJ Barrett, was a really good move, honestly, because it fits in the point guard conversation. And OG has been great for the Knicks. I mean, good for them. And then with Siakam moving to the Pacers, he's been doing well in the Pacers. He's got more spacing with the Pacers than he would have ever had with the Raptors, because the Raptors seemed allergic to the concept of spacing. Either way, the Raptors are not going to do well this year. I was comfortable with that, and it does suck. They're my basketball team, but it is what it is. Oh, Iberian, thank you for the super chat. Hey Mark, I know this isn't music related, but what are some tips you'd give to other people on the spectrum if you feel comfortable sharing? Thank you. This is a bit of a complicated conversation, and I'll try to get a little bit more serious here, because the first thing I want to say is that everyone's experience is unique, and mine is not representative of what it was for a lot of people. I say that specifically because I had a lot of counseling when I was very, very young. I was diagnosed clinically very, very young, when I was about 5 years old. And I was able to get a lot of training, get a lot of like social acuity built up over the course of, I'll be very honest, not a great childhood years, but I actually hit my teen years in stride. I had a lot of support very early on. My mom did a lot of research to make sure that I was best equipped. And then from there, like, I think part of it is working to improve your own sense of self and hand-eye coordination. It takes time and discipline, but it's not a bad idea. It's always good to work on. The social stuff is tougher. I think online can be both a blessing and a curse, because on the one hand, you can meet people in your community very effectively. On the other, Not all communities online are very good, so it's tough to actually get some of that. And I think in-person time is always valuable. I think the key thing that one thing that I actually did, take a public speaking class. I genuinely mean that. I was extremely lucky in, I want to say, like 20, like in like ninth grade. We had a teacher in high school who actually who actually had a communications class specifically teaching you how to public speak and actually communicate with people in general and speak in front of a larger audience. That's one reason I can do what I'm doing here, but it's also very valuable because it teaches you other things in terms of how to connect with an audience or in terms of how to structure your speech. Like, I don't try to throw in a lot of filler words when I'm talking, and you have a good ways of just getting more accustomed to that. It's very difficult. It's the sort of thing I don't always recommend for everyone because, again, stage fright is a thing. I don't really have that, but it is something worth doing. I also want to say that my experience is not representative of everyone's because, again, I had so much help early on. And I also think that, again, how especially how men and women or non-binary folks deal with being on the spectrum can be very, very different. And that's just, it's much more complicated. I think I probably have the baseline and easiest answer there. For clarification, how did you get the name Spectrum Pulse? Well, that's half of it. The other part of it is that it's a multi-layered physics pun. Mm. Um, Eclipse. How long have I had Voltorb? I have had Voltorb since 2012. Actually, I had a friend of mine make him for me. He's adorable and cute. And he's actually survived going through the wash, which is kind of incredible. Voltorb is doing very well. Why? Oh, here's a good one. Tiny Bubbles. Why did you change your intro from "Hey there, folks" to "Hey there"? Was that a random decision? It actually wasn't. And the interesting thing is, I actually is tied into some public speaking stuff. I actually had been listening to a podcast, and one thing that was highlighted is that most of the time people are listening or watching YouTube on their own. And it means that you're trying to focus on people on their own. They're trying to build a one-to-one parasocial connection. I can't assume that people are watching my stuff as a group. So saying, hey there, folks, as if I'm implying that there's a bunch of people watching doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's one reason I tried to come across. I still want to be colloquial, but I want to actually be streamlined a little bit more and it could come across as a little bit more impersonal. So yes, it was intentional. Jay Hilfiger, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Chicago drill rap? Uh, Tough scene. It's not a scene that I'm always feeling like I'm best equipped to discuss. I feel like a lot of conversations around Chicago drill can be very exploitative in terms of focusing entirely on the criminality or the associations presumed or assumed or otherwise with the scene rather than the music itself. I think that's a bit of a shame. I think again, there's a lot of systemic factors there that again I don't always feel the most equipped to talk about. I think the scene has had a lot of ups and downs. I don't think all of it is for me per se. It just doesn't always click. But the stuff I like, there's stuff I like in it for sure. All right. I want to talk about this one. JCH Music. Do you think R&B will get a proper resurgence? I think it already is actually. Like I think we are starting to see a rise of more R&B in terms of the acts that are starting to get a little bit more traction. I think pop has been kind of in a really shaky place for a while now, while R&B has just been remarkably consistent. I think with the downturn of hip hop and how much hip hop and R&B have become intrinsically linked, I think it's tough to gauge, but I also think on the flip side, you have the Afrobeat scene, which feeds into a lot of R&B textures. And I think there's a real possibility for a lot of growth there. I wish a lot of the labels that predominantly handle R&B would know better with what the hell they're doing. Looking at you, RCA. Um, Albon, Nostalgia Critics, The Wall versus OK Computer. OK Computer, obviously. Um, let's go here. Wimpy 0914. Hey Mark, have you heard the new Twice song? I have not. I know Twice is coming out with something new, and it's on my radar to potentially hear. I like Twice, so we'll have to see where that goes. Anyways, 96. Have you had a chance to see Jason Isbell in the 400 unit live? I have not. I'm kicking myself because they came to Toronto actually relatively close to me last summer. I just missed them. I think it was overlapping with when I was in Montreal. Just poor timing. All right, let's see. Okay. Oh, Izuki, thank you for the super chat. It feel like me female rap. I feel like female rap is overtaking male rap this year. What do you think? Um, I don't like the split of them. I don't feel like they have to. I don't feel like they are. The segregation of them is artificial, and I feel like there's enough women who can out rap men, and it doesn't really. I think trying to put them in their own separate subcategories is a misnomer. I think there's more women who have buzz in the scene right now and traction than the current crop of men that are being pushed in mainstream rap, but it's by no means consistent. I think there's been a lot more news around it because of all the infighting between Nicki Minaj and Megan Thee Stallion and Ice Spice and Lotto, which is weird. But again, there's a lot of infighting right now. It's drawing a lot of attention. I don't know if what's overtaking it one way or the other. From Thundercat, happy 45K. Thoughts on go-go music? Don't listen to it. Don't feel equipped to give enough of a commentary. Um, from the incomparable Franchisa, do you think you'll ever cover anything with Eurovision more in depth? Probably not. I've thought about this. I go back and forth on it every year because I've got a lot of friends of mine who are really into Eurovision. I'm not really. I think I've been around the scene enough to recognize specific trends and things in the scene. I just don't think that I am the best equipped, especially as there's a part of me that would go very political on that very fast. I don't think anyone wants to see that. From Austin Donnelly, thank you for the super chat. I've been getting really into black metal recently and really enjoy the vibe of Sayor. Do you have any recommendations for similar bands? I do. Panopticon, Falls of Roros. Those are the two immediately. Wayfair, if you're more on the country folk side. Wayfair actually put out an album last year. I didn't get around to it. It's really good. So yeah, if you're into that folkier side of black metal, there's plenty in that lane. The one comment I will say is just be careful because those that land in near neo folk and other specific subgenres can trend on the fashy side, and you don't want to touch that. Okay, J Hillfigure, thoughts on Benzino's new diss track against M? It's embarrassing. Why is this still happening? I know Benzino is jealous that his daughter is getting more attention than he is, and his daughter's Coi Leray for the record. But at the same time, the Benzino beef was so embarrassing for Benzino and what it did to the source and back in the early 2000s, that's hip hop lore of a different era. You don't want to there's no point with that. Thanks for super chat though. Rid PR. Can't stay because I'm currently at work. Just felt like popping in to say congrats on 45K subs. Thanks a lot, Rid. Good to hear from you. Okay, I actually do want to have a lot of thoughts here. Trippy Ways, thoughts on UMG taking their music off of TikTok. I'm glad we actually brought this up because this is actually something I've been monitoring for a while, and as in the past week. I feel like I was a little ahead to it because again, we saw some elements of how that conversation was breaking down. And then in my Discord server, which if you at any particular point want to join because of hey, support the channel, all that, Patreon, that's always appreciated. Beyond that, though, it was something that I was keeping an eye on because it's fascinating but layered as well. Before I get into that, thank you all, Paul Feedman, for the super chat. Appreciate that. One thing I want to say here first is that TikTok as a whole is probably getting away with more than they normally otherwise would compared to other right sharing organizations. YouTube pays a premium to allow so much music to be played on the YouTube Music app. And the reason that YouTube nearly went out of existence is because the record labels sued them aggressively for all the pirated and copyrighted music that got shared here. It's why Content ID is a thing, which, funnily enough, has gotten better the past year or two, believe it or not. The labels don't give me nearly as much crap unless you're talking about specific countries. TikTok, on the other hand, they have licensing agreements, but they're a little more tenuous, especially given how much TikTok came to monopolize a youth audience and the fact that so many companies basically dumped all of their promo budget into go make TikTok videos. And that is awful for the artists. Let's be real. A lot of artists who are not good at that sort of video content or they just want to focus on making art, that's a really rough straight of things. So when you start hearing that TikTok is now you're having a situation with UMG who feel like they were not getting their fair share of compensation out of TikTok, where TikTok apparently gave them a much lower, well, they wanted to give them a fraction of what they were giving before. It's a bit of a messy situation where now UMG is like, okay, I'll call your bluff. We will pull all the music off the platform. And they're only confident this would work based off the reality that TikTok is still not really that profitable. They've tried having their store, they've tried having their creator economy pool where they will pay out. But again, as a company, they're not making the dividends that they really need to be sustainable, especially at the volume of TikToks that get generated and stored. Because again, they're a video storage platform at the end of the day, and video storage overhead is high. The other thing I want to highlight here is I think UMG is basically the key thing is that if you're listening to UMG talk about the community of TikTok being toxic or talk about how things are being run on that platform in terms of AI might be a consideration, but this is about money, plain and simple. This is about money and market share. So, and they were clearly prepared to take a stand and drive nails into TikTok, especially as in comparison with other streamers or other larger platforms, they don't have any ownership of TikTok, but they put so much reliance on it. So as they're going to try to break the platform, and honestly, I don't take sides in this. I don't think it's, I know enough creators on TikTok where that sucks for them that they see a lot of their catalog, which relies on music getting muted. I don't feel good for TikTok because, again, I don't take sides with platforms, which are often don't pay their creators very well. I feel bad for the artist. In both, I feel bad for the TikTok artists who lost a lot of what they're doing and they're going to struggle to utilize music in the same way. I don't think it's going to lead to any resurgence of independence because you can't bet on that based on TikTok's algorithm. I think that's a really dubious thing to look at. And I feel bad for major label acts who sign into the system and they're told TikTok is the primary way in which they engage with their fandom. And that at the end of it, oh, sorry, you can't use TikTok anymore. So how are you going to get promotion? It's not like labels have done their due diligence to actually prepare for any sort of promotion down the road. It's a real disappointment. I think it's only hurting the actual fans and artists down the road. And now, granted, for me, as the flexibility of moving the majority of my stuff on YouTube and staying on YouTube, that's a win. But again, people shouldn't have to do what I do to do well in this. Okay. Paul Feldman, thanks again. Did you listen to Queens of the Stone Age's new album from last year? I did. I didn't care for it. It didn't stick for me. I've got long-standing issues with Josh Homme that are outside the board there. I just it didn't do enough for me to bother with my review. I was so behind schedule at that point anyway. Didn't make sense. Okay. Jay Hillfigure, thoughts on 50 Cent's career? Wildly overrated thanks to New York music press. Get Rich or Die Trying is a very good album. It is not this genre-defining titan of hip-hop in the early 2000s. It was extremely popular, but 50 was never as good of a rapper as he was hyped up to be. He was more a presence that just dominated the zeitgeist, and the music scene was set up to reward him for that. The rest of his catalog is massively uneven. From Jane's Diary, do you have a favorite album in the space rock genre? I really don't. I don't listen to a ton of space rock the way you might think I would. I got into a lot of that side of progressive metal, but outside of that, it's not something I go back to all the time. That's all I'm saying. My audio is staticky. I know that. Like I was having issues with audio setup all day. And again, I think I need to get this reconfigured as it is. Mike's just out of frame there. Okay, let's see. Crunchy ASMR. Yeah. Are you gonna listen to Gabby Barrett's new album? Yeah, I saw that. Probably not. I'm not particularly interested in giving her a lot of airtime. She's doing her thing. I don't need to engage with it. And again, like I've got so much stuff on my docket as it is that I don't really need to bother with her. Okay, what's your Super Bowl prediction? Also, thoughts on Taylor's inevitable Super Bowl halftime show. Well, here's the thing. Taylor was originally offered a halftime show at some point. She turned it down because at that point given her fame, especially at this point, that it would kind of overshadow the event. And that's not kind of what Taylor or the NFL wanted. So, them going to Usher, with Usher already being in Vegas, that made all the sense in the world. I'm excited for that. I want the 49ers to win. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs do. I'm not going to lie. I was rooting for the Lions. That would have been really, really cool. But again, it was one of those fluky games where nothing was going right. And at least they kept Ben Johnson as their OC. So I think the Lions are going to be a problem. They need to address defense in the draft. We will see how that falls out. Did I hear the album from Depeche Mode released last year? I did. I never got around to it. It was Again, it was good. It didn't really stick enough for me to say more about it. And frankly, I had better dark wave and dream pop and stuff and like stuff in that space that I would go back to more than that Depeche Mode album. Mm, let's keep going here. Oh, yeah, I heard about this Apple Music terms where artists get like 10% less royalties if the music isn't mixed into Dolby Atmos. That is, oh, okay. I'm gonna rant a little bit about this because this is something that I've seen a lot on streaming. Because I do have Apple Music to sync up with my iTunes and pretty much just that. And I predominantly stream on Tidal. The whole push towards atmospheric audio is often so badly done. You can tell that it was done in conversion and the dynamics are often very, very off. They work if you have a room that is built to actually accommodate it. In the majority of cases, if I'm just listening through headphones, the atmospheric audio just distorts everything in a really unpleasant way. The entire mid to high range gets really shifted awkwardly. I get what it's trying to do. It's a gimmick, and I think it's bullshit what Apple Music is trying to push it on people. It's just as bad as when Tidal tries to push it on people too. From Jacob B, congrats on 45K. You planning on any retro Billboard best list? And if so, what year would you do next? Yes. I am planning on a top list of some kind because I really missed doing them. They're a lot of fun with the historical research. I want to do one after I get my video essay done. And again, the script is nearly done with that. I need the collabs I want with it. I need some interview footage. I need to double check all my research and then just actually do the damn thing. Hey, if it's a slowdown in February, I got my work cut out for me. But to answer the follow up of your question, I would do a retro billboard list. It might be a best or worst. Not sure what yet. I also know that it would be something that it would be a year that I'd want to talk about and that others don't. So we'd have to see where that would go. I might pick something that's a little bit off the beaten path. Okay. Blake Ganells, what do you think of the debut album from the last dinner party? I said it briefly on Twitter, and I'll talk more about it when I put the review up. I will say it's very, very funny to me that theater kid core of the late 2000s and Tumblr core of the early 2010s that recalls a lot of Marina and the Diamonds. It's funny to me that that's now slipping into the nostalgia window. It's going to be interesting to see how that album holds up the more I dig into it. Stephen Paulus, thanks for the super chat. Hey, Mark, thanks. Congrats on 45K. Are there any classic country albums you recommend giving a listen to? There's a lot. I need to put together a proper classic country list of recommendations. I think Grady Smith has done some videos on classic country. I would go look at his stuff first because it would probably be more in depth and categorical than the stuff I could provide off a live stream. Matthew Cole, what do you think about the new Queens of the Stone Age album? I already mentioned that. It's okay. It wasn't special enough for me to go back to it. I think it's a little better than Villains, but I also think I overrated Villains at the time. Again, like Queens of the Stone Age's fall off has been I can't even call it a fall off, but I just don't think they're going to reach the heights of like Clockwork or Lies to Paralyze again. Um, from D, most expensive vinyl. I will be bringing this up in my vinyl collection review, but I actually have an original pressing of Idols' Brutalism, and that has just reached obscene prices on Discogs right now. But I got it because I thought Brutalism was a phenomenal album. I reviewed it, and I try to get every album I think is great in my reviews if they get pressed. And I got that back in 2017, and then Idols blew the fuck up. Just as Zach, happy 45K. Will Resonators return? Oh God. Okay. Resonators, I loved that series. I loved the research. I loved learning so much about a lot of genres of music that got me into hardcore. It exposed a lot of really cool underground hip hop. What it exposed to me was two things. Number one, my God, so much research is required to do those videos well. Number two, nobody watched them. Well, let me rephrase that. Not enough people watched them to justify the amount of work I was putting into them. And getting interviews was tricky as well, because that's what the one thing I would want to do is go back and actually do that final interview as a culmination episode. From Noxicur, would you ever cover classic albums again, like in Resonator series? I love that series, miss it dearly. I do too. Again, I'd love to do it. I just need the right time and motivation, and I would need more people to start watching it. Matthew Cole, thoughts on the band Travis? Travis is one of those bands that kind of fell off the radar outside of a very specific scene in their time. They got so much discourse around the late 90s and very early 2000s, and you never hear about them anymore. I'm not even sure if they're still together. When was the last time they released an album? Let me Google this. Travis band. They are still around. That's interesting. And they've been steadily releasing music. Well, let me rephrase that. They had their window from Good Feeling on to about, I want to say, 12 Memories, and then the releases get more sporadic from there. Stephen Paulez, sorry for asking this. Have you listened to Megan Trainor's song Mother? Why would I do that to myself? I don't practice self-harm. Alrighty. Okay. Actually, I've seen this a couple times. Louis Pellegrin. Thoughts on Sean Everett's production work? I like a lot of it. I feel like the mixing and mastering can be a bit dicey depending on which engineers he's working with. But oftentimes it produces a weighty side of that Americana that's worked with the Killers. It worked with the War on Drugs. Like there's a lot there that I appreciate. Thoughts on Renee Rapp? I don't get the Renee Rapp thing. I know she's getting a lot of traction. I have just never done the dive into what her deal is. I see her trending every other week, and I don't quite follow it. I will at some point. I'll have to figure out who she is and what her deal is. I've had other things to do. From EU, will you ever cover Burial? I need to do the Burial deep dive. They're one of those there's one of those acts that I feel like got so much acclaim and very specific nuggets of the internet that I really want to get into them. I just have never had the proper shot to do so. Grimmoo's thoughts on Square Pusher. Actually, I did a Square Pusher review back in the original 2020 episodes of On the Pulse. I I didn't love that Square Pusher album that came out, but of that time, but there are Square Pusher albums I like. Okay, let's Protest the Hero, yay or nay. Another act that was covered in 2020's On the Pulse videos. All right. Keep looking here. Okay, Square Root. With how you've talked more about music in Spanish, have you found a record in Spanish that you would consider a classic? I wish I could say I could speak on this definitively. I can't. I'd love to, but I don't feel as equipped as I would like to. For Matthew Cole, love your essays. Have one ready in the works? Yes, I do. I'll talk about more later. From Jay Halefigure from Chicago, yeah, the drill rap scene is crazy. Again, it's the sort of thing I don't always feel the most qualified as I'm Canadian, and the Canadian rap scene can be crazy too. Stephen Paulus, thoughts on Michelle Branch? Very much of her time. I was kind of a little late to her when she started coming out, so I don't have the biggest opinion on her catalog. The Spanish love songs count as in terms of music in Spanish. No, we know they don't. Although they are actually coming to Toronto in like 2 days after my birthday. I'm excited for that. Okay, let's take a look through here. Thoughts on Dune, and are you excited for Dune Part 2? I'm excited. I don't think they're going to stick the landing, mostly because a lot of Part 2 movies don't stick the landing. So I'd love for it to be great. I really would, but we'll have to see. Okay, let's take a look through here. I have not heard Justin Timberlake's new song yet. I know it's dropped, and I know a lot of people have covered it. I really have not been interested in looking into it the same way, so we will have to see when it inevitably charts on Billboard Breakdown. You'll have to hear what I say then. EU thoughts on the Raptors finally blowing it up and trading everything away. Brought that up earlier in the live stream. I think it's the right move. It resets the clock and timeline. It allows to be okay in the draft, although I don't think this year's draft class is exceptional. So we will have to see. Jay Hillfigure, off topic. I see you subscribe to FT Signifier. I've been watching FT Signifier since early, like last year. I like a lot of his stuff. I think Feek is really smart. I've enjoyed a lot of his conversations. He's got a thoughtful edge to him that I appreciate, and I also appreciate his hip hop side. Like again, there's a lot of common ground in stuff that we like. Although he likes the Chicago Bears, poor man. Okay, let's keep looking through here. Norbert, what's your favorite song written by Max Martin? Tough to say. Max Martin's written so many songs. I think it'd probably be a toss up between I Want It That Way and Blinding Lights. Not sure which. Arzia, have you seen the new A24 show Has Been Hotel? I don't know what that is. It's interesting that it's tied to A24. I will have to, again, I've heard that something from it might be charting this upcoming week or so. So I'll look into it. Cruz Walden, which video essay of yours do you think has aged the best? Tough to say. I think the Bro Country one will age well because it's really much a lot of that essay was about capturing a very specific historical time. And that's kind of the benefit of what I did last year. Excuse me. It's kind of the benefit of what I did last year with all of the historical content is that it was very much capturing things in a time, in a place, and it will really change as my thoughts and politics probably evolve. So I don't know yet. I don't know which one will age one way or the other. I think the one that has the least obvious mistakes is the Bro Country one as well, simply because I put so much work into it. I think the Fallout Boy one is going to be interesting to see how that one ages. All right. Um, Son of Jesus, have you heard the new Smile album? I'm not super interested in Radiohead projects that are away from Radiohead. Like, I'm not the biggest Radiohead fan as it is, so I had no interest in looking up the Smile. So I keep hearing it's great, but again, like it's hard for me to get super invested in Radiohead projects as it is sometimes. So it's not something I was seeking out. And I think there is often I feel like Radiohead gets overpraised so much in certain circles, it doesn't give me the impetus to want to seek out other bands outside in their network and vicinity. Um, Stephen Miller, hope Joji's album this year is far better than Smithereens. I do too. Again, Smithereens came and went so quickly, and I feel bad because Joji had momentum, and it felt like Smithereens just like nuked all of it from orbit. Trip Raise. What sources do you use to keep up with new releases? I use a bunch of different things. I use Metacritic. I use my Rate Your Music. I use people in my Discord who give me lists of, hey, all this is dropping. Please come watch it. I There's often some stuff that is tied into a couple of music Twitter followers that I normally keep an eye on and talk about new releases. Big one in country and indie country specifically is Farce the Music. He specifically puts out a list of new country releases every Friday. You always find some level of gold there as well. Matthew Cole, thoughts on clipping? Assuming this is not a joke made at my microphone's expense, I've reviewed clipping 4 times. Yeah, I've reviewed all of clipping's major albums. I've got plenty of thoughts on them. They're great. I really wish we would get another album, but I have no idea if or when that'll happen. Um, Heard of Anastasia? She's an American singer who had several top 20 hits in Europe in the early mid 2000s, but strangely very little success on her home country, USA. A lot of that happened depending on your label and depending on where she was pushed and marketed. I honestly was not super familiar. I've heard of her name before. I just not super familiar with the music. Jay Hilfiger, thoughts on Mellow Bucks? I'm not familiar. I can't really speak definitively. Okay. Let's go through here. Joseph Hines, what announced albums are you most hyped for in 2024? Truth be told, I don't have a lot of stuff in which I am super over the moon hyped for. A lot of this is I'll let things come to me as they will. So I'm not sure what I think will. Nothing's really leapt off the page for me yet. So in terms of what I'm most hyped for, I know what I'm not hyped for. So I'll say that. Stephen Paul, so you've listened to One More Time by Blink 182. I have. Uh, Latter stage Blink makes me very, very sad because I was never huge into Blink 182 in the first place. And now with what they're doing now, it does not work for me. It just doesn't. All right, I'm just going to change the color temperature a little bit here. All right. JCH Music has On My Mama by Victoria Monet grew on you. Yes and no. I get what it was doing. It's never fully clicked. That's been my issue with Jaguar too. Like I really wanted to like Jaguar too, at least in comparison with all the R&B that dropped, and it was getting so much critical acclaim, and it just bounced off me. It happens. Ellie Yeet, which one? Brave Faces Everyone or Weather Vanes? That's a conversation to have in 2030 when I do my best albums of the decade list. Presuming I'm still making, if I'm still making videos in 2030, it's going to be interesting to say the least. Who knows what the internet's going to look like. Jay Hillfigure, thoughts on Benny the Butcher's new album? I heard it. There's parts I like. I like some of the guest verses. I think some of the production is a little bit more forward thinking than I expected. Uh, you can clearly tell it's got a little bit of that major label sheen that they're in terms of the direction they're pushing him. I gotta be honest, it's been hard for me to get invested in a lot of the Griselda scene for a while now. So it kind of I came and went for me a little. Matthew Cole, do you think A Weekend in the City by Block Party is underrated? Yes, I do. I think that album is a little underrated. It's still, a lot of people only think Block Party was Silent Alarm, and they are more than that album. Silent Alarm is their best, but A Weekend in the City is good. I'd say Intimacy is pretty good too. Okay. JCH Music, do you dislike All About That Bass? Man, All About That Bass is aged badly. That whole retro era or that retro throwback sound in the mid 2010s is aging a lot more weirdly than you might expect. I'd say it's 50-50 how much any of those songs hold up, and All About That Bass is not held up at all. Bruised Leg, will Hiss be at number one? Depends on whether or not the streaming clears. I think there's a shot, but I it her getting the charting place where she is off of even the limited time that song was out, it's very clear that she's in a situation where she'll be doing well. So if she goes to number one, that'd be awesome. I would still hedge my bets on it though. Philly the Best 123. Will we cover Usher's new album? I actually want to. Like, I enjoy Usher's music a lot, and if 2024 is the past couple of years has been a career renaissance for Usher, I'm okay with that. I definitely want to cover his new album. So probably. Lavish out your video essay on JT and Class is one of your favorites of yours. That one, this is one thing I think I brought up before. That video has aged better than I expected. Like, especially with everything that happened with Britney last year, that I thought at the time when I was making it that I may have been going too hard on Justin Timberlake. Turns out, no, I may have been going too easy in some points. Tiny Bubbles, would Truth About You have been a threat to your worst list in 2022 if you expanded your criteria? Yeah, it would have. Pretty comfortably so too. It's a god awful song. Let's keep looking through here. Hyperion Nova, have you heard Silence Between the Songs by Madison Beer? I have not. I don't really seek out Madison Beer. She's just not my thing. I think her big issue is clearly she's got a really good voice, but production is holding her back. And I also think some of it's songwriting too. I don't think the writing's fully there. Matthew Cole, why don't you like Octung Baby? The thing is, I don't dislike Octung Baby. Octung Baby is one of those albums I feel like it had to follow the Joshua Tree, and the Joshua Tree is a classic. And the thing with Octung Baby is that it was going for the super hyperbolic. They're clearly doing everything ironically, but you're still expected to appreciate it somewhat unironically. It's trying to have its cake and eat it too. And while it's probably U2's best version of that, I don't think it's as effective in comparison with other albums in their early 80s run. Okay, let's keep going here. Oh, from Jay's Diary, prediction on MGK's new rap album. Why? To me, that screams management. Something is wrong with MGK's management. I've been saying that since, well, 2020, really. And I don't think it's gonna like why like I get that the pop punk like moment that we were starting to see in 2020 didn't really take off the way it should have. But at the same time, going back to the rap sound is not a great look for him, especially as like I think he will just be capitalizing on lack of competition, and that's not exactly what he wants to do. And let's be real, his skills as a rapper are not prioritized on his major label stuff. All right. Yeah, a lot of people are calling Tickets to My Downfall a one and done fluke. I don't want to say that. I want to say that there's more like prospect there, but I also know I'm being unrealistic there. From Louis Pellegrin, you looking forward to the Jlin project this year? Yes, I'm excited for that. I was really kind of annoyed that we only got the EP this year. That new album is really interesting. I'm excited for more Jlin, especially as she seems to be going into really interesting and cool places within footwork and her brand of electronic music. All right, will rap make its comeback? I okay. I want to highlight this because this came up in kind of the conversations about whether or not hip hop had a bad year in 2023. The answer is no, not really. Mainstream rap had a bad year. I would say that like hip hop outside of that or hip hop culture in general, I think had a pretty good year in 2023, but that was assuming you were going outside of the mainstream. So it's entirely determinant upon whether or not mainstream acts get their crap together. And I'll be honest, what Universal's doing with TikTok is not helping matters. Um, Thoughts on music being removed? Do labels, artists have the right to do this, or should listeners be allowed to listen to whatever they want? A lot of consumers feel very, very entitled to the music that they have. Like, if an artist wants to pull down their music, and there's still options for the art to be found in other places, like you can go find it. Like, just because, like, if you want to go find, like, example they brought up was "Do What You Want," which is Lady Gaga's song with R. Kelly that she pulled off of a bunch of different projects. The song is still the song from separating anything from R. Kelly, but you kind of can't because R. Kelly is kind of integral to why that song is so kind of sickly curious. Um, I think artists are entitled to do that. I think the consumer saying, "Well, we want it, and we want it now." Well, then pirate it. Like, go find places to get it. Not everything is set out to like. I feel like it's a very entitled attitude. Azek, thoughts on Brandy? The boy's mine. Brandy's great. Phenomenal voice, often underrated in my opinion. Rockin' movies. Thoughts on Cancer Christ's God is Violence? Very Mike Patton-esque and musically is recent Dead Cross Mr. Bungle, an interesting subject matter. I have not heard it, so I can't really speak on it. From Lavish Shadow, did you come up with the phrase angry white boy phase, something you commonly heard growing up? I don't know if I came up with it. I'm fairly certain I had heard it in various spaces online. I just really brought it up when it comes to a lot of the rock music that was very popular when I was where I would have gone into that. Like a lot of that mainstream rock radio is catering to that demographic. And they were for and it was very plainly obvious that they were doing so in their marketing, in their promotional tactics, in the audiences of the acts they attracted. Mike at the piano. Thoughts on Legally Blonde movie and musical? Uh, Last time I saw the movie was years ago, so I remember it being okay. I remember it being a little more clever than it got credit. The musical I have not seen or don't have a ton of familiarity with. Um, let's see. All right. Did you like Frank Turner's heavier music like the band The Million Dead? I've heard it. I think it's aged a little rough around the edges. It doesn't always come through as cleanly as it should, but it is what it is. Jay Hillfigure, here's a couple questions. Thoughts on Lil Wayne's guest features plus his mixtape output. Thoughts on Fab and Jadakiss. That's just a lot. Lil Wayne's guest features have gotten a lot better than they were at specific points. When he cares, he's on his game. His mixtape output is wildly uneven. I'm more of a fan of Jadakiss than Fab. Alrighty. Okay. Son of Jesus, thoughts on Billy Joel's new song? Have you heard it? I have. It's not good. I get Billy Joel doing a bit of a comeback because he probably saw a lot of the dollars that he's just leaving on the table by not putting out new music. I think the production's really bad on it, especially around the vocals. It doesn't do it for me. And as is coming as someone who actually likes a decent amount of Billy Joel. Okay. Blender Noob 64. I wasn't around for it, so what was LimeWire like? Was it like uTorrent or something? It was kind of a pre. The thing with LimeWire, it was a program you downloaded that allowed some level of peer-to-peer file sharing. It was in the same vein as BitTorrent, but where torrents you downloaded a torrent file and that allowed you to connect peer-to-peer. LimeWire was not like that. LimeWire, you were just downloading the exact file itself. And the issue that came with LimeWire was that everything was badly labeled. Like the odds of you actually finding something that was what it said it was is very, very low. And often the big joke was is that a lot of songs, especially a lot of rap songs that were put on LimeWire, were just pumped up by Joe Budden, and that was really funny. Okay. Um, Liam Komodo, do you think Usher will bring out Bieber, Luda, and Lil Jon for the Super Bowl show? I don't know. And that's actually a fascinating conversation because I really don't know. I think Usher could do it all himself. I think the highest chances are that he brings out Lil Jon and Ludacris at least just for yeah. The rest he can do on his own. He can do Burn, he can do Confessions, he can do really a couple of his big. He can do Scream, he can do Climax. Like it'll depend on what he chooses for the set list. It's going to be very interesting. Okay. Um, just looking. Louis Felgren, thoughts on Hemlock Spring? That's it. For those of you who don't know, Hemlock Spring, if I'm correct, is the associated group with Future Islands Spring. Hemlock Spring. Yeah. Oh no, I'm wrong. Holy shit, I'm very, very wrong. I have not heard her stuff. I take that back. Who was I thinking about? Samuel Herring. What he does another project that's tied in with hip hop. I'm just trying to remember what it was. Hold on. What is it? Because he does a lot of guest appearance stuff. He's on the Billy Woods. He's been on Billy Woods' stuff a few times. He was on FaceTime. So let me look that up. I know he's quoted as someone else on it. So I'm trying to figure out. Oh, great. Yeah, never mind. Okay. All righty. Okay. Looking through here. Um, okay, it's starting to go quicker. Interesting. What do you think of Poppy? I've reviewed Poppy a number of times. I think her breaking out of the abusive nonsense relationship that she was in with her former producer has only been a net good. I do think that with Poppy specifically, I wish the music stayed a little bit more interesting. In terms of the innovative genre fusion she was doing, I'm not thrilled by where she's at now. It happens though. Lucy W. Opinions on alt rock bands in the mid 90s. How do you think the scene has aged? Interesting question. I think there's a lot of acts of the mid '90s that kind of had that post grunge wave where they were like, like we had the. I think you could separate them out into a couple different groups. You had the adult alternative side. You had the groups that were trying to be a little rootsier, play more to the folk rock and college rock scene, and then you had post grunge acts that came out of that. I think there's a lot of overlap between a bunch of them, and I think the scene's aged okay. Lyrics, of course, are going to be one of those places where a lot of those bands kind of shoot themselves in the foot. I think a lot of those bands are a little overpraised in certain circles, but I also think some of them can be very underrated. So, again, it's kind of a mixed bag. I think with nostalgia for that scene, it's going to be very interesting where they go from here. Hmm. Okay. Let's keep reading here. Where does Taylor Swift go after she's done remaking her albums? Well, she'll just keep making her own albums. Like she only has two left, and once she's done with those and that larger experience, I honestly have been expecting her to take a hiatus for a while now, especially after the Eras tour being as huge as it is. It's not like she's ever going to have to work a day in her life again. So she'll just make music at some point. I also wonder if at some point she gets married or has kids. Like that is also a possibility too. We'll have to see. Hmm. Alrighty. Just reading through here. That's what I want to talk about. A lot of these are like some of these questions. I want to highlight this here. Um, like okay, percentage of all English language music that's been released from 1950. Do you estimate you've heard? Maybe not even close to 1%. I'd say half a percentage. You don't realize how much music is out there. I would say fractions of a percent. And the truth be told, the majority of people do not hear anything close to everything that's been released. Like, I might hear a fraction of a percentage of all the music released this year from everyone. Like to ask to put that on a larger scale, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. Like, again, it is physically impossible for us to hear everything that gets released in a given year. So to go back even further doesn't make sense. All right. Okay. Flag YouTuber, do you speak multiple languages or just English? Predominantly just English. I know a bit of French, a bit of Spanish to get, but not enough to like speak in any conversation or get by. I'm better with reading other languages than I am speaking them. Uh, Am I wrong or thinking you're overestimating it? Yes, I think you're right. I think I am overestimating that I've heard even more than that. I think it's fractions of a fraction of a percentage. And that is true too, Cube Melons. I think a lot of this music is forgotten. We don't realize that's the other tricky thing when it came to doing resonators. And I want to bring this up specifically because resonators was so difficult, not just in terms of the research, but the reality that so much of the stuff that, especially in underground scenes, is just lost. The history isn't kept. And it's so hard to go back and find a lot of it, especially when a lot of underground scenes, it wasn't considered, if you outside of the stuff that was critically acclaimed, a lot of the stuff wasn't considered worth keeping. And so much gets lost and forgotten. And it's truly sad. Azuki, thank you for the super chat. Which artist do you think would be the decade defining artist of the 2020s? Really hard to say. We are only three and a half, we're only just past 4 years in. So again, I think I would have a better answer for that maybe in a year from now. Then maybe I have an idea. I think you got to put Taylor Swift in the conversation. You got to put Drake in the conversation. Um, those are the two I can answer immediately. But in terms of larger sustainability, I don't know yet. Yeah, Morgan Wallen for sure. I think Morgan Wallen is in that category. It's annoying because I don't like how he releases his albums, and most of them aren't very. And the two albums are not very good. But again, I have to hope that he starts making interesting music again. That'd be nice. From Cruz Walden, thank you for the super chat. I am an aspiring journalist in a school for it. Any tips of finding success in the field? I I struggle with whether or not I should consider myself a journalist. I try to do due diligence with my own sources. Again, the big thing I always that's a good one. Sources. Check your work. Make sure you get double confirmation if you get a scoop or a story. It's better to be like I know the big push, especially in a lot of modern journalism, is to be first to the punch. I would rather be right. And again, it's like there is still a lot of value. That's the other thing I'll say. I think there's a lot of value in long form journalism that is not always immediately punchy and grabs a lot of clicks, but will give you that sort of catalog to say, I wrote this, I built this, and I wrote about something that mattered. The stories that matter tend to build traction on their own, and they're the things you want to hold on to in the end. Keep on. I say Billie Eilish on that list. I would need to see. Well, Billie's first album was in 2019. I need to see her next album. Um, what are your thoughts on Headley? Well, aside from their frontman's like massive pileup of allegations, which are just disgusting, and he deserves all the prison time he's getting, probably more. The music was aged really badly. It is a brand of that era of pop rock that I don't think is flattering. I don't think it's turned out all that well. Besides Lainey Wilson, are there any other women in country you see emerging as a mainstay? Yes. I heard Megan Moroney's album in passing before I wanted to cover her on Billboard Breakdown. She's good. She has it. I think she's got the chops, and I I think her label situation is set up good enough that she should be able to get some traction. It'll be more in the pop country lane. We will see where it goes. EU, what genres do you wish you could have covered in Resonators? I had a list of genres I wanted to cover. I wanted to do classic country, like 60s and 70s country. I like in terms of some of those classic albums. I wanted to do K-pop, like legitimately do K-pop properly, as in go back to the 90s, get a couple some of the seminal albums and go from there. I really wanted to do death metal. Like death metal is one of those genres I kind of bounced off of a lot. I'm way more into black metal and grindcore and stuff like that. But death metal is one of those ones I really wanted to do properly, do the proper historical dive, and it would require a lot of work to do properly. I hold up. Okay, let's see what else. See what else is here. Okay. Yeah, looks like it's slowed down a little bit, which is nice. Okay. Um, do you think rock is going to make a commercial comeback during this decade? There is no. If rock decides to embrace streaming, possibly. I genuinely mean that. I think the big failure of the majority of mainstream rock, especially the stuff that gets shipped to rock radio, is that they fail to embrace streaming. And they are relying on a lot of antiquated institutional heft that is only diminishing. Like I feel bad for anyone who's still covering the rock charts because it's a wasteland over there. For Matthew Cole, okay, all right. You're trying to talk about female country music. Who is a good starlet? I should start with Brandy Clark. Brandy Clark's good. Casey Musgraves is good. There's a lot of acts that are really good in terms of women in country. Even like again, it's not a like sometimes the acts are good. Like I'd say Miranda Lambert's up there. I'd say sometimes Carrie Underwood was there. Reba McEntire is there. There's lots of great women in country. Biggest pleasant surprise album last year. I really loved that Chapel Roan album. That came out of nowhere for me. I knew she had been bubbling around the indie pop scene for a while. The fact that album is as good as it was and was so consistently fun, great surprise. Nourished by Time. That album came right the hell out of nowhere. I put it on the end of December. I'm like, well, it's getting a lot of year-end lists. It might be good. And then it blew my mind. I wish I could find vinyl on it that was remotely affordable. Just as Egg. Thoughts on Khalees? I wish Khalees's music was good. I don't. I think she had a lot more personality than she did in terms of execution. I think the way Pharrell treated her was really bullshit. The way Nas treated her was even more bullshit. I think she kind of got wrecked over by the record industry. I wish the music was better. Hmm. We are over an hour into this. Once again, thank you all for watching for this long. I appreciate doing the Q&A. I'm hoping I'm able to get to a lot of different people. And then from there, it's going to be again. I'm probably going to go till about 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just in terms of what people want to see. And once again, hit that like button. I really appreciate it. Okay. Um, didn't Reba McEntire and Kelly Clarkson collaborate at some point? I'm sure they did. I know they've done live stuff before. I don't know if they. I'm fairly certain they have a couple collabs actually. I can't just recall them off the top of my head. Um, what are some artists like Jesse Ware last year that you hope you can finally get? I've got an ongoing list. It's tough to say. A lot of what I'm hoping to do this year is get to artists that I just haven't had a chance to hear in the same degree. Like the Willie Carlisle album that in the review that nobody watched. Um, I'm really happy that I was able to get into his sound a lot this year. That was a lot of fun. I've got a couple other indie country acts with larger catalogs that I'm churning my way through as we speak. So we'll see. From Michael McViddle, contributing to your selling out period, lol. Hmm. The funny thing is, I could have contributed to my own selling out period a long time ago because I have never taken a sponsorship. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. Oh, thank you all. I appreciate some of you for being again. Once again, I appreciate I appreciate all of you for sticking around this long and listening to me ramble and talk at my computer. Crazy Eve. Oh, actually, here's one I want to go to immediately. Thoughts on the recent Pitchfork situation. I don't know if this has been brought up because I've gone off on this on Twitter a lot. Um, it's union busting. Let's call it what it is. The fact that Anna Wintour basically never cared what was happening in Pitchfork when Condé Nast bought it up until they unionized and she started showing up. In the fact that it's getting reorged under GQ and they laid off so many union members, let's call it what it is. Let's not dance around what's actually being done here. I think it's a tremendous disservice to a lot of tremendously talented writers. I think anybody who's celebrating Pitchfork going under because they got a review that you didn't like, get over yourself. Like I have issues with Pitchfork that go back years, but that doesn't ultimately contribute to the fact that people lost their jobs and that the site is ultimately primed to get worse, especially when it comes to if they want to go back to the old boys club and indie sleaze. Like, let's be real. A lot of those 2000 albums that were put on a pedestal because of what they were in a very specific niche context at Pitchfork in the 2000s, a lot of them have not aged well at all. Just warning you. All righty. Okay. Square root. How do you feel about Peggy's choice to collaborate with Kanye? Um, I think it's I think it's different than what No Name's issues were. No Name stuff with I think it's different. I think it's similar, but it's also not because there is some level of worship of your idols in terms of these are people that they put on pedestals, and I don't always think that was smart. Like because it's the sort of thing where you're willing to look past a lot of their flaws in order to get specific results out of it. I think for No Name, she doesn't. I think No Name was in the situation where she was looking to burn down her reputation anyway because I don't think she was really as invested in it. That's kind of was the fundamental thematic arc of Sundial, and man, it kind of worked. That album wound up on a lot of year-end lists, and I think they were looking to fit something in there. Um, Peggy, it's not surprising. Like again, I think he's not quite. I don't think he was quite aware of how bad of a look it was. I also think it's in the sort of situation that it makes him like you could tell me the in the whole meeting and conversation, it didn't look good. And I think he knows it didn't look good. I think it's also very much I think he's also slowly coming to be aware that the politics that he espouses in a lot of his art has always had that edge lord angle to them. And there's always been some level of I'm going to troll and piss off people, but I also think there's certain lines that he's realizing some people wouldn't cross. So that's gonna it'll be interesting to see what happens with vultures, which by the way I'm not covering because I have too much I have other things to do than waste my time on a fascist. All right. Stephen Paul's any great underground emo albums from the 2000s? Yes. Say Anything. They were a band I was actually kind of into a decent bit when I was getting into that era of emo. They did some good stuff, especially in the early 2000s. Thoughts on exploring jazz? I really would like to, but I just do not have the time to do the proper exploration of jazz that I would want to as of yet. It's in the cards. All right. Okay. Tom Catwick, what happens if Vultures charts songs on Billboard Breakdown? We'll burn that bridge when it comes. I don't think it's as likely though, because A, it assumes that Vultures comes out in any of the forms that it's set out to be. That's a massive open question. But the other thing is that Kanye's record deal right now doesn't nearly have the same level of security that it did behind Donda. So the question of what gets tied in or how much streaming promotion he will have, even outside the fan base, that's going to be very interesting to note. If it happens, like I'm not giving him a full review. Shows up on Billboard Breakdown. We'll see what happens. Okay. Did you know Steven Seagal had a music career? I did, and I knew that because LP, the rapper, is actually a big Steven Seagal movie fan. And he talked about, and at one point I saw an interview that used to be at the AV Club where he talked about Steven Seagal stuff, and he talked about Steven Seagal's music career, and it was genuinely funny in terms of how they all fell down that weird rabbit hole. And that was honestly one of the funniest reviews the AV Club ever ran. All right. Have you been ever secretly been watching the Billboard bubbling under charts? I look in every now and then. Honestly, it doesn't give me a ton of I don't have a ton of time to do that added level of granular research. Oh, this is what's bubbling under. Because again, like it's cute to watch, but it is very rarely predictive of where something is going to land. Um, does anyone know what happened to Alessia Cara? Alessia Cara put out an album fairly recently. Like I think she did. Alessia Cara last album. Yeah, she put out an album in 2021. Um, she got a pop run, and I never thought Alessia Cara's management was that good. So to see the fact that she got 3 albums in is not too bad. I didn't think the last album was good. It was especially great, but it was there. Tiny Bubbles, where did the idea to make the exact same review for Donda and Certified Lover Boy come from? Good question. I actually wanted to do that as a bit of a gimmick because I was done talking about Kanye. Like after his antics in 2020, I was done with his ass. But at the same time, I'm also like, you know what? There's an interesting concept of this beef that's back and forth between him and Drake. And I'm like, I can do things with this and make the societal commentary. And the albums, after hearing them, like there is a lot of common ground. And it was a cute little gimmick and it worked. KZ, has Renaissance grown on you? If anything, no, it's actually shrunk on me. I think the album has I think the more house I've gotten into, the less I like that album. And I've read a lot of critique of people who are much deeper into house music who view it as a better curated album than actually like representative of anything. And like again, Beyonce is a phenomenal performer. I'm sure it all goes off live and that vibe in the actual concert experience. On record, I don't care for it, especially when you had Special Interest drop Endure that same year that took a lot of the very stark house related themes around it and was a lot smarter politically. They banged way harder. It's just better album. Atticustini, is Kyle Craft one of your most anticipated comebacks? Kyle Craft, I Google this every 6 months or so. Like, hey, is Kyle Craft dropping something? Um, Apparently right now he's doing a lot of stuff with his family. Apparently he had a child who was born who had some complications with it. I'm hoping all the best for him. So again, if and when music comes, it'll come. Okay. Machine Gun Kelly, do you think we'll get Machine Gun Philly? Do you think we'll get at least one more Radiohead record this decade? Almost certainly. I think we'll probably get one more Radiohead record and probably one or two more Smile records. That's where it seems like the majority of their energy is right now. Okay. I'm just reading this. Once again, everyone, thank you all for sticking around so long. I appreciate it. Again, I appreciate the fact that I am like over an hour in. I'm still getting questions, and I appreciate that y'all are sticking around and actually dropping as many super chats as you have. You guys have been very generous. I genuinely appreciate that. Stephen Paula's opinion on Become the Night. He and I run in very different circles. I think we cover similar subgenres of rock on occasion. He's uh I'll be polite and say that we trend in very different directions. I think we would have very, very stark political differences as well, and not for me. I'll leave it at that. And I'll also say I'll say this: there are worse YouTubers who are in and around the rock space who piss me off more than he does. Nosker, you ever go on album of the year site? I do actually. I do have my own little. I have my own like Spectrum Pulse account on album of the year, and I've been on there for since like 2018 actually. Okay. Uh, have you heard about Jason Derulo's new 27 track album dropping the 16th? That is something I am looking forward to ignoring. Yeah. Now I'm seeing the comments about the rock artist, the rock YouTuber that I don't really care to talk about. I don't have any respect for him, and I don't think he'll. But you can also tell he's approaching art in that specific space from someone who has been in a very specific scene and industry. So part of it is coming with industry professionalism and all that nonsense. Part of it is also I just don't care for a lot of his takes, and I don't think we would get along on pretty much anything. Um, Had there been any bands you've loved that have gone downhill? Oh dear. So many of them actually. The frustrating thing is that nobody can keep it up forever. The reality is that there's some acts that you might love at a time but are never going to hold the landing. The one that breaks my heart a lot is Nightwish. I think like after that album that they put out in 2011, after Imaginarum, they've never been the same. That kind of after Annette got fired, I didn't really care for what happened. Thundercat, are there any changes that you want or wanted to implement to Billboard Breakdown? There's plenty. I'm always one thing that I've always talked about with Billboard Breakdown is that it was structured very much like a TV, something I could take to TV if I wanted to, like have a more professional looking like set or be on my couch. Which honestly, I got to replace this couch. But there's other things that I need to actually have in place to take Billboard Breakdown to its next level. And it will take time, and it would probably take a lot. It would take a different space than I currently have. I think the format is solid. I think the aesthetics could be improved. Casey, should female rap diversify its subject matter? Sure. I would also think that every genre should diversify its subject matter. The fact that female rap gets singled out as, oh, they only talk about like flexing and fucking dudes and like and draw a lot of comparisons to sex and stuff like that, acting as if that is anything different than say what pop punk does with every other goddamn album, or what country does, or what metal does, or what pop does. It gets pigeonholed in very specific cases, and I want you to examine why that is. From Quavon Bloom, thank you for the super chat, appreciate it. Don't replace Voltorb. I'm not replacing Voltorb. He's the reason half of you are here. I'm not cutting in on my audience. Sun G's thoughts on Lana Del Rey going country for at least one album. I've been calling this for years. I'm not at all surprised. She's probably going to go for more of the Laurel Canyon 1960s sound. I think she'll probably do it decently, although I would imagine it would probably have more of a folk tinge than a proper country tinge. That's just me knowing how she's writing songs these days. Thoughts on Post Malone going country? Again, not at all surprising. It's something he's wanted to do for a while. It could be interesting. I'm actually kind of intrigued by it because I liked Austin a lot. Hmm. Um, I was gonna leave, but I need to ask: what if I make a Pokesona for you as a Voltorb? I am not. Voltorb is not my favorite Pokemon by any means. Like I'm an old Gen 1 guy when it comes to Pokemon, and like I want to say my old party was like it was Arbok, Scyther, Kabutops, Gengar. Those were 4 I know off the top of my head. Like that was my jam. I'm like old Gen 1 stuff. But like again, I don't there's no need to do Pokesonas or anything like that. It's cute though. Appreciate it. I One thing I always do say is like dress like the anime character you want to be. So Arbok, that Pokemon is horrid. Okay, Arbok's stats have never been good. The key thing is that Arbok's move set was great. You can give him Toxic, you can give him Earthquake, you can give him Rock Slide. In Gen 1, that was valuable. E. Nunez, what is your least favorite music trend that has occurred in your lifetime? Tough to say. There's a lot of music trends I think come and go in specific ways that I don't think always flatter themselves. Um, like the club boom is something that I think has aged really rough because nobody figured out how to properly mic percussion or bass lines very well in that era, and a lot of it's aged rough. I say the same thing is true with like snap music. Um, there's a couple like I don't love deathcore at all. I think a lot of what's happened to metalcore and prog in embracing a lot of gent traces and the way they stack up riffs, I find that very tedious. I think that's probably the trend I like the least is how much that came to dominate progressive rock and progressive metal for the past decade, and it's not for me because I'm a melody guy over that kind of riff pattern, that very technical style. But at the same time, like it's made so much of that sound so tedious. Um, And no, bro country is by far not the worst trend of this era. I think bro country, again, as you saw in the video essay, there was a lot in bro country that had its problems, but stuff I could like too. Might be my last super chat. Are you familiar with the sasscore genre? I am not. Once again, Stephen Paulos, thank you for all the super chats. Very generous. All righty. Okay, Antonio, how do you feel about Janae's projects before Sold Out? Sail Out had some gems on it. I like Sail Out. I got to it after Sold. I think Sold Out was such a massive leap in terms of its concept, in terms of its orchestration. I really love that album. Um, her pre-projects before then, you can very clearly tell they were indebted to the scene of R&B she was coming up in at the time. I just feel like there was such a big leap to her when she actually put out her debut. All right. Thoughts on Brent Fayez? I wish I liked Brent Fayez. I genuinely do. He put out that album in 2022, and I was trying so hard to get into it, and it just doesn't work for me at all. Ryan F, have you had the opportunity to dive into melodic death metal? What's your opinions on the genre? I've heard some of it. I absolutely have. I've covered some of it. Like back, I did more of it when I was doing On the Pulse, and I just covered more in rapid time. I've not had the chance to do the full deep dive though. Again, death metal is one of those genres I feel like is eluding me a little bit right now. Okay. Have your thoughts on K-pop changed over the years as you've heard more? I say so. I think there was a certain era of K-pop where it was so blaring and in your face that is gradually being tempered, and I think that's actually made a lot of K-pop acts that are coming out pick up more groove and do more interesting things has been really nice. I tend to prefer J-pop a little bit more over K-pop because J-pop has more of the has different types of that rock sound. It's also a little smoother, relies a bit more on the R&B touches that I like. But again, like K-pop, I've come to like more K-pop than I ever thought I would. Quavon Bloom, did you hear the Black Star album from a couple years ago? Yeah, I did. Um, I did not review it because it was exclusive to a podcasting platform, which was weird. And I generally review albums that are widely accessible unless they are amazing, like the Eric Church's and EP, and that eventually wound up on streaming anyway. Again, it's not as good as it should be. I really want to love it, and I just don't. Thoughts on Royal Blood? They have a sound. They sure have a sound. I feel like once I got the Royal Blood gimmick, and then I watched so many acts try to rip them off. It didn't do a lot for me, to be honest. Just as Zach, thoughts on early 2000s R&B and Rolling Stones top 100 R&B songs list. That's something I did mention on Twitter. I think is kind of interesting. Early 2000s R&B. When I was growing up in that era as like a preteen, I did not appreciate it for what it was. I'm still not the biggest Aaliyah fan. That's just me. It just wasn't my. I think she's got a very pretty voice. I don't love all the songwriting, and you can really tell R. Kelly's influence is all over that. And R. Kelly is the big factor that you have to talk about when it came to that era of R&B. I think Rolling Stone's top R&B songs list is they have a lot of the right artists. I would pick different songs. Um, a lot of the songs they have there are good. There's a lot of the choices I like, but I'm just sitting there and I'm like, you could have gone for deep cuts and made that list so much more interesting. All right, let's keep looking here. Thoughts on Nick Drake? I like Nick Drake. I don't have a ton of deep thoughts on it, partially because I feel like there's a deeper dive into his older catalog I need to do. Okay, let's keep looking here. Would Arkells be one of the bands you love that went downhill for you? The funny thing is, I've seen the Arkells live a couple of times, and they're a great live act, but they're just so. They became the issue that comes with a lot of Canadian rock acts that have to keep chasing Canadian rock radio. And I wouldn't say they were that in the beginning. I just think the sounds that they were latching onto in the mid 2000s are better than the sounds they had to latch onto as time went around. So I don't really blame it on them for going downhill. I blame the scene. All right. Any predictions on the Grammys tonight? I'm not going to watch the Grammys tonight. It's going to be wonderful. I don't have to care about them. It's a great thing. Um, I do predict there's going to be social media backlash and outrage over something. I don't think they're going to get everything right because the Grammys never do. My general argument is that the country categories will be better because the institutional connections with country and Americana are more well established, and I don't trust anything they're going to say in R&B, hip hop, rock, or metal. I always have from KS, thanks for the super chat. I always have trouble finding modern metal that prioritizes catchy melodies over heaviness. Any Rex? Um, I go to Avantasia if you like a metal super group. They're more on the symphonic side, so a little goofier, but I tend to like a lot of that side. I'd say if you can find prog metal bands that prioritize melody, you're often in for a pretty good treat with their catalog. Um, I'd say certain black metal acts that will lean on melodic texture and get embrace something a little bit more ambient or closer to dungeon synth. You can have some level of luck there, but it's a bit tricky. I will admit that. Stephen Paul. Okay, another one came to mind. If you feel comfortable answering, what is the most offensive song you've ever heard? I don't know, honestly, because the thing is that I hear music that there's music that offends me on an aesthetic level. There's music that offends me on a content level, and then there's music that offends me because of what it represents and what it's doing. I think the closest thing that comes to that would be something off of Sam Hunt's Southside that just hit every berserk button for me imaginable in terms of sound, in terms of lyricism, in terms of what that album represented in the industry. There was so much there that pissed me off. it's hard for everyone to check. It's hard for an act to check off all three boxes. Thoughts on the One Direction members besides Niall and Harry? Um, Liam just keeps humiliating himself. It's kind of amazing. Louis, I think he's kind of doing his own thing. It's fine. Zayn's in a weird spot. I feel like Zayn had managed to get out the gate fastest, but then people just kind of started forgetting what he was putting out. He didn't maintain a lot of mainstream momentum. I know there was label issues. I think he was on RCA. Let me check that. I want to say he was Zayn Malik label. Yeah, RCA. That explains a lot. Because he's put out 3 albums. His last album came out in 2021 with Nobody Is Listening. And I think the problem with that is very much of, well, he was right. Nobody was really listening. Music was only okay too, but he was also stuck on RCA, and RCA has dog shit reputation when it comes to promoting a lot of their acts that are not their highest names. And even then, they run into a lot of issues. Also, allegations. Yeah. Okay. Man, isn't Zach Bryan literally the worst corporate country? No. Zach. Okay. All right, I want to deal with this now because I've seen enough of this happen on social media and it's dumb as hell. And this is someone who has been covering Zach Bryan before. Most of you know who he is. Zach Bryan started off extremely independent. After he left the military, he started putting out very acousticy, very stripped down material that was never having any, that frankly, I was shocked he got signed to Warner. But back in like 2019, 2020, he had legit ass groundswell in the independent scene. And then he got signed by Warner. And then he's been putting out music in, like, especially in 2022, when he put out American Heartbreak, that's not a commercial record, like, at all. Like, in terms of its sound, in terms of its presentation, in terms of commercial country, that does not fit the mold at all. Now, some of it would change. He has softened some of his edges for the self-titled album and Boys of Faith, especially with some of the collaborations. But when anyone comes up to me and says, "Oh, he's an industry plant," or he's being driven up by the industry in some manner, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. Zach Bryan explicitly was not from that scene at all. He's in a distribution deal right now with Warner, and that's done a lot of gangbusters for him. But a lot of his groundswell has been pretty organic. Furthermore, if he was so much beholden to the industry, he wouldn't have put out like as much of his push against Ticketmaster as he did. What are your favorite Rise Against albums? A favorite is Siren Song, The Counterculture, followed by The Sufferer and the Witness. Mine was older than that. I actually Rise Against. Hang on. My favorite Rise Against album, and I tend to go back to this a lot. It's Revolutions Per Minute. That's my favorite Rise Against album. He definitely met Luke Bryan. Okay, Luke Bryan's a bit of a different situation. He is very much industry. He plays the game and he plays a very formulaic game. But even still, I wouldn't even say Luke Bryan is the best comparison for the most corporate of Nashville. Like, yeah, he plays that game and he rode a lot of trends, but you want the trend riders in that scene. You want Tim McGraw, especially how his career has mutated across the 2000s and 2010s. I would go to Blake Shelton as well, given all his stuff tied in with The Voice. He's very much industry connected. A lot of people with Luke, the funny thing with Luke Bryan is that you dig into his catalog, there is things that shows off some level of eccentricity. He started off making a lot of like summer mixtapes in terms of that scene. He thought for a while, I thought he was going to be the next Kenny Chesney. And then he's evolved, he's became an A-lister in the scene, but he's always had weird eccentricities to his sound. The fact that he's so much older playing in bro country, and which is, again, the guy's in his 40s. So it's a bit of a there are interesting things that I think tends to get brushed aside if you only know the singles. Jay Hillfigure, thoughts on Tupac's career and impact as a rapper? I've always liked Pac more than Biggie. That's personal opinion, because I think Biggie was the better rapper. Tupac was the better songwriter in terms of like melodic construction and hooks. I think after he died, his estate got kind of exploited. Well, it's posthumous releases. It happened, and it was kind of a little heartbreaking. I think that his impact is often It depends on who you talk to. I think his impact, you would need to know where his impact is. I don't think it's always as respected as you would expect. Like, I think Biggie has had a longer trail of imitators and impact, whereas Tupac has had it, but you need to know where to look for it. No reactions. Why aren't you going to review the next Kanye album? Because he's a fascist. Like, I don't cover like National Socialist black metal. I don't cover someone who chooses to go on that pedestal. He is not entitled to my platform. It's simple. I am one of those that is a conviction I have always held to. All right. Would you say Jason Aldean's Highway Desperado is his worst album? Truth be told, I didn't hear it, and I had no desire to. Like, again, Jason Aldean albums, if you've heard enough of them, they all sound the same. Like, I'm not going back to waste my time, especially as his albums are all real goddamn long too. Are you excited for the new Chelsea Wolf album? I am actually. I'm not sure who she's working with on production this time because that tends to be a bit of a make or break conversation for her. At least that came with Apocalypsis and Abyss. So we'll have to see. Um, yeah, might as well ask. Why don't you review new Pest Noir? Yeah, I'm not covering Pest Noir. Not even close. Although I will say this, I think there's a lot of people who are outside of extreme metal and don't know how to handle acts that have as much baggage as Kanye has. Especially as there's going to be a large, increasingly loud, annoying bunch of fans who are like, "Oh, he doesn't take it seriously. He doesn't believe it." When in reality, we now have probably a decade's worth of evidence that a lot of this he just does. So I think there's a failure that a lot of non-metal, non-punk music journalists have, and that they don't know how to cover art that is going to platform ideas and textures in this lane. And honestly, they could take a cue out of listening to metalheads occasionally. Funnily enough, um, what's the worst thing about producing a Billboard Breakdown episode? In this case, it is copyright. The predominant thing is always trying to measure how much music I'm going to be allowed to get away with that'll get claimed but not blocked. And that's always so hit and miss. It's dependent upon labels, dependent upon artists, dependent upon genre as well, because K-pop acts can be a real pain in the ass with that because fair use works differently in South Korea than it does in Canada and the rest of the world. So it's a bit of a crapshoot. What drives me nuts is whenever I get a Billboard Breakdown episode that's long as hell, that I get it done, I get it uploaded. Oh, and it's blocked everywhere. So, and then it's just a bit of a crapshoot to get it online. Is there an artist who has charted somewhere that you wish you could be a lot bigger so you can cover them on Billboard Breakdown episode? There are so many of them. I don't understand why Boy Genius did not have the breakthrough last year, like on like properly charting in the mainstream. That made no sense to me. I feel like there's a whole bunch of acts who are making very accessible music that are not penetrating the charts because again, ossified radio structures. They didn't go viral on TikTok or streaming. The Carolyn Polachek album was built to be huge last year, and it just wasn't. It broke my heart a little bit. I think it depends on where marketing dollars are spent. Here's one that I think the 1975 should be way bigger stateside on the charts than they are. And it's a little shocking how little they have actually managed to break through stateside. I always find that very interesting. JSH Music. Do you think Noah Khan will last a while in the spotlight? I don't like him, but yes, I think he's the one thing I said when I reviewed Stick Season. I didn't like Stick Season, but I'm like, he's got chops. He can write a song, he can write a hook. He's got a built-in audience. He knows what he's doing and he's well managed. Noah Khan is going to be big for like that album that comes after Stick Season will be make or break. Odds are higher that he makes it. With everything that Matt Healy has done and said, do you really want that? No, but it wouldn't like again, like the sad thing is that the 1975 are not as interesting as Matt Healy seems to think they are. Um, did you ever listen to Home Like No Places There? That is, I'm trying to remember Home. like no places there. That's by the Hotelier. I've never had a chance to get into the Hotelier as deeply as I'd like to. They're one of those acts that was on my list. Like, okay, when they put out a new album, I'm going through the back catalog and catching up. At's Realm. Have you ever been to Maine? I have not been to Maine. Actually, no. Billboard puts you in charge of their chart data. What are the 3 changes you make? That's a great question. Okay. First change I make. First change I make. Just trying to run this through. I make sure that Billboard sets their year-end categorization from beginning of December to end of November. That is set in stone, that you don't do any funny business like trying to shift it back. If there's a need for a 53rd week, you have a 53rd week. It just sticks with that. That'd be my first change. Second change, I'd bring back the policy where something was not officially claimed, like something was not officially claimed as the official version of the song, that you would actually be able to get some additional streams from that. I forget what it was called, because they used to have it when it helped track things for virality. Why not January? The tricky thing with January is that it just gets kind of muddy, and it would actually push back when I could do my year-end lists in terms of stuff that we like. Say if it went from January to December, not only are you forcing a lot of people to work overtime over the holidays in order to get out a year-end compilation, but then you're also forcing everyone who does like top 10 lists to now work in January, and we're not going to get that traffic. And one other thing I would probably fix, I would be consistent with recurrency rules. Like no bending, no like his the funny thing with recurrency is that so much of it is dependent upon what's going up and down on the radio or streaming charts. And Billboard has always been kind of shaky in terms of what exceptions they give one way or the other. Just draw hard lines. Yeah, user generated content, Tiny Bubbles. That was it. Okay. How do you feel about industry plans? I have a really contentious opinion on industry plants, and that there should be more of them. I'm gonna let pause you there because I think that might surprise some of you, because I don't think a lot of you know what industry plants are. I think it's the assumption that an act is being backed up in the industry bereft of talent, or that they got there based on being nepo babies, something like that. Spoiler alert, there's a whole lot more of those than you otherwise think. But in terms of artist development, in terms of being able to foster talent that comes with actually getting backed up, trained, officially marketed by the industry, that's not a bad thing. It would require the labels take responsibility and actually do some goddamn work for once, but I don't think it's a bad thing to have some of that structure. It's not going to be the be all and end all solution for everybody, but I think for some people actually looking to get traction in the music industry, it's a good thing. I think it's, again, very, very telling who gets tagged with the industry plant label. Like, especially when you have the argument that I can make the argument that Eminem was an industry plant, very candidly too. Yeah, you make arguments. You can say that Julian Casablancas is an industry plant because of his nepotism connections. My general comment with Eminem is that he was someone who was found by Paul Rosenberg, and he was found by Paul, he was found by Dre, and he was put in an environment that after Infinite, that his talent and marketing was set up for him to do very, very well. The problem is that given when things go viral nowadays, there isn't that artist development process. And that's a real shame. That's why you get so many one and dones. The label gets their check and then gets out. All right. Yeah, like Lucy W. It's interesting. I talked to a radio producer who worked with both top 40 and country stations. His feedback: top 40 stations need to cultivate talent and support artists. That's true. And I think that I think the important keyword there is cultivation of talent, because the way that a lot of labels treat talent these days is as inherently disposable. Like it makes it a lot harder for me to get very mad at the kids who blow up off TikTok off one song, or the hype rappers who get a dance and they're one and done. I feel bad for those kids because often they're kids. They're stuck in predatory deals and contracts where the label signs them up for X knows how much, and then the label stops supporting them after they get their money and they leave. I have covered so many of those acts in a lot of my Billboard breakdown and worst list, and it's heartbreaking looking at those kids. They don't deserve that. I should not have more longevity in my career talking about their music than they have as artists. All right. Artist development feels like a cop out, but they need something more centralized. Yeah, the thing is that I blame the labels a lot for this because I think the labels being unwilling to take a risk on an act where they can foster talent is a tremendous misstep. And then they whine and they say, "Oh, there's no artists who are coming up that have star power anymore." Sometimes you need to build star power or do some work with your A&Rs. Come on. Heather Rosh, apologies for the mispronunciation. Thanks for the super chat. What's your opinion on the 90s pop country boom? Who are some of the best and worst artists for it? So, okay, bit of context here. Pop country, that boom was specifically centralized in, I want to say, 95 to like 2001. And that was the era of Lone Star, Tim McGraw, Faith Hill. I want to say Martina McBride, or she might predate that. But the big one's Shania Twain. And Shania Twain is Canadian, and Come On Over is one of the best albums of that era. I can argue it's one of the best albums of the 90s. Just a tremendous act. Like, that scene was good. It was a little plastic and silly. I don't think all of it has not aged well, but I also blame some of that on the pop trends of the time that it was hopping on to. A lot of power ballads that got very syrupy and slow. Like, the stuff that's more upbeat and fun, that wasn't the Dixie Chicks, like, I mostly liked. Um, your opinion on Shania Twain's new album? She kind of needs to hang it up. The production's bad. It's really, really bad. I feel bad for Shania because she's kind of stuck. Like, she's being put on the pedestal as a top flight diva, and to be fair, she probably deserves it. But her own stuff has been rough, and I feel bad for her because I don't think she's working with great people. Ever since the split with Mutt Lange, it's not been good. Do you think Maroon 5 can make a comeback this year? No. I think they're about done. And let's be real, like, I'm kind of tired of dumping on them at this point. They're just not interesting enough for me to care. How would you handle holdovers between years on your best and worst hit songs list with top of the charts year and top 200, especially when songs debut very low on next year and rise much higher the next year? I count them the year they debut. Sometimes they're low and it takes time for them to become a thing. That means I'm just ahead of the curve. Soundgarden and Alice in Chains are often compared. People always argue who is better because I don't understand because I find them very different. How do you feel? I agree. I do find them very different. Alice in Chains is like Soundgarden to me didn't take the risks Alice in Chains did in terms of subject matter. I think the comparison happens between Wayne Staley and like Chris Cornell, given how their unfortunate passings and and there was some overlap, but Alice in Chains had a gnarlier, thicker, much darker side to them that I don't think Soundgarden never really reached that far into that territory, at least for me. AJ Bloodstreams, thank you for the super chat. Mark, I love your videos. Been watching you since 2017. Keep up the hard work. My question during your Billboard breakdown episodes: what is a song you could have sworn to be a hit and just didn't? God, there's so many of them. There are so many songs that you think are going to be smashes that you love, and they just never take off the way they should. The big one that always jumps out to me is Usher's "Good Kisser," because that was very clearly set up to be, a massive hit, and it just never took off outside of R&B radio, and it breaks my heart. That song was fantastic. All righty, let's keep it going here. Does it confuse you when artists change their names? Not really, mostly because they tend to always go back to their name. I remember when Snoop Dogg became Snoop Lion for a bit, but that didn't last. Like, a lot of it depends on how your name and branding is. Why do you use excessively complex vocabulary in your reviews that's probably like 10% of people actually understand? That's how I write. And let's be completely honest, that's kind of how I talk as well. Like, a lot of the vocabulary that I'm using is the same sort of thing that peppers a lot of my reviews as it is. Like, and again, the other side of that is I also script all of my reviews. So if there is a need to look up words or look up context in which I'm presenting, they are available. You can go check the scripts. They're online. All right. Thoughts on Prince's discography, fave songs and albums? I need, that's a lot. Prince has so much music and so much of it is good, but the larger conversation of what his best stuff is something I would need to devote more time to. Okay. Thoughts on Harris's video on plagiarism if you watched it. I did. I actually mentioned it in my year end, not my year end list, in my Bro Country episode. And it was the sort of, oh crap, I am planning a massive video essay that has some pretty incendiary quotes, and I want to ensure that all of my sources were well checked. And it basically became a bit of a headache because I liked what Harry did in terms of calling out plagiarism on YouTube. I think that's very valuable. I think that there's a lot more of it on this platform than you might expect. I know when I've been plagiarized on YouTube, and frankly, I don't really care. Like at least for me, but I'm also I'm in the extremely fortunate situation that I know about it. I'm I know when someone's trying to copy what I'm trying to do, and they haven't seen that level of traction on their own. But at the same time, like if it was a larger person who blew up after something I'd said, I'd be a lot more salty about it. That being said, um, I think what Harry did was very, very valuable. I think the video was good. It made me kind of panic and double check all of my work with my Bro Country video. Discovered that a few of my audience aggregate sources for doing country radio research in the 2010s was kind of shaky, at least in terms of some of my research. Had to pull up a bunch more that basically confirmed all my conclusions, and also discovered that radio aggregate data has been locked down very effectively by the industry because they recognize that data is extremely valuable. Okay. Is it true you were a huge Hillary Duff fan? What's your favorite singles from her catalog? I was a huge Hillary Duff fan as a teenager, like in the mid 2000s. I had a huge crush on her too, which was again like mid 2000s. It happens. I was a teenager. I actually saw her live. She's really good live too. Um, the funny thing is like I remember there was that album I want to say 2003, 2004 that I really liked. My sister got it, and I may have conveniently borrowed it a lot more. So, yeah, I was a big fan of hers. Uh, okay. Do you have a day job in addition to YouTubing? Absolutely. I could not afford my life and my lifestyle if I did not have a day job. I do. Like, I'm not making nearly as much money. Like, I do. YouTube does well for me. YouTube and the fact between YouTube and Patreon has done really better as a business than I could have ever hoped for, especially that it's sustainable. But this is not my full-time job. Like I literally have my work laptop sitting right next to me over here. And like I'm working a 9 to 5 that's alongside all of this. And honestly, and this is something I've thought about for a while now because you often see the conversation about what YouTubers are going to do when they retire. I don't see myself doing that because as much as I'd love to do YouTube full time, I think there is an element of my own personal growth and satiation that I appreciate that I have a job that is more technical that allows me to be more creative over here. Like keep the both sides of my personality and my own personal impulses satiated. And again, like the one good thing I can say about my full-time job is that it's very stable. It lets me and it gives me the flexibility to do YouTube as well without really impugning upon it. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Your opinion on the recent wave of YouTube channels getting hacked? It's awful. Again, it's only getting worse, by the way. Like I had to go through my hellish hacking experience back in 2021, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And again, I said this when I did a debriefing video with my buddy Luke over on his podcast channel, and I walked through, like again, I'm extremely lucky that I am tech savvy and that I have all my stuff backed up. and that I've got, like, if I lost my channel in a day and I could go and re-upload and rebuild everything, I could. It'd be hell to get through all the copyright nonsense again, but I have that flexibility. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have, and it's one of the benefits of the fact that I do have a full-time job. If I lost my YouTube channel, I had to rebuild from scratch, and it was my only source of income, that would be terrifying. JCH Music, was Cupid close to making your best list? It actually was. Last song cut. Louis Pellington, have you ever thought of writing another book? I'd try to buy your book someday. You know what? I'd love to. I've got a stack full of ideas that goes off and on in between D&D campaigns and stuff like that I would love to incorporate into another book and story. Just a matter of time and see where it goes. Okay, we have a little less than 5 minutes left before I close everything off. So if anyone has questions or super chats to get in, now is your chance. I'll try to do this a little bit more rapid fire. No reactions. Do you think John Mayer is done? Yes, and he's been done for a while. Are you somewhat familiar with Quebec's pop scene? A little, not a lot. What made you make Billboard Breakdown? I wanted to do something unique and special. Billboard Breakdown was something I put a lot of time and effort into brainstorming how I wanted to do it. And I'd always been curious about the charts. It let me be more on the ground with it. And again, the way I always wanted to do is it's a chart show combined with my regular criticism and kind of like a sports framework. That works for me. Any thoughts on Blanket by Kevin Abstract? Have not heard it. Do you think you're going to review the new Rap Ferreira album as soon as I get lyrics for it? Are there any genres of music you straight up don't like? I'm not a huge reggae fan, and I'm not a huge tech death fan. I am looking for places to be proven wrong on both. I like the music montages you do for your mid-year list. Have you considered making your 100 to 51 entries for your best list as a rapid-fire montage? The amount of editing that goes into that would be silly. I don't see enough. I wouldn't see enough return, especially having to go through the amount of copyright nonsense I normally do. Favorite Cure album is Faith. Okay. Any thoughts on The World is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer Afraid to Die? I covered them in an episode of On the Pulse in 2021. Thoughts on Post Malone's country album? I'll have to hear it when I see it because, again, it looks interesting, especially that collab he's apparently teasing with Brad Paisley. That's going to be something. Hair metal band you think gets overlooked? Night Ranger. Night Ranger, I think, is wildly overlooked. I think there's a lot of talent as a B-list hair metal band that I don't think gets the proper attention. Stephen Paula says, one more, I swear. Are you familiar with Digimon? I watched Digimon when I was 8 years old, and I have not gone back to watch it since. I was always more of a Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh fan anyway. Thoughts on Milk Banana? Inconsistent albums, honestly. I want to like Milk Banana more than I do. Thoughts on the Cowboys this season? Sorry. You brought back Mike McCarthy. Sorry. That's mean. That's very mean. Okay. Any genres you wish you can get into? Oh, hang on. Let's go through here. Was that very much a urinating tree reaction? It was. It was. I know I have fans of mine who like the Cowboys. And again, your problems go so far beyond just Mike McCarthy, too. It's a Jerry Jones issue at this point. Let's be real. Who's a better chance of doing a 180, Muse or Maroon 5? Muse, handily. Noxacura, you ever use TV tropes? I have my own page on TV tropes. It's actually it's alarmingly well documented too. I have some fans who have actually maintained that. And that's felt really special. Cruz Walden, did you ever watch Degrassi at all? Would you ever? Not really. Degrassi kind of bounced off. It was in a different subset. I know my sister watched a little bit of it. I never got into it. Thoughts on Cardi's new singles? I don't care. Again, Playboy Cardi just doesn't click for me yet. None of them have really stuck. Do you think Joanna Newsom would put out a new album this year? I mean, we can dream. It would be cool. Again, I like Joanna Newsom a lot. I'd love to see a follow-up to Divers, but it's been 9 years. Think Lil Baby can come back to good graces? Yes. Lil Baby needs to find something new to talk about. In fact, let's actually bring that up. If people bitch so much about female rappers all saying about the same thing, can somebody say that Lil Baby has made the exact same song about 50 times? Uh Ever get a chance to listen to Baby Metal's fourth album, the other one from last year? I did not get a chance to hear it. I think Baby Metal kind of had their formula. I have not really followed up with where they're at right now. I feel like 21 Savage has the same formula. No, there's a little more variance to 21 Savage. I will give him that. I was real harsh on him early on. There's a little bit more gradation in his sound. And we're going to have one last question here. I'm going to look through here. Which one do I want? I want to end on something good. This is a good one. Do you think Cardi B will release an album this year? That's a great question. I have no idea. Truth be told, I don't think Cardi thinks that she needs to put out an album. I know that Atlantic's been trying to get something going for a while now. I think the whole conversation about whatever Cardi has, I think they've tried to start an album rollout at least 2 or 3 times and it just hasn't gone anywhere. I think there's stuff like she's been great on guest verses. I like Cardi a lot, but again, to me, if we might not get a second album. That is a very real possibility. Kind of sucks because, like, I think she's got potential. I think her and her writers have potential. So we will have to see. So, in the meantime, we're at 3 o'clock on my end. We've been here for 2 hours. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. It has been a good experience. I've had a lot of fun. I don't think I've said that many things that are that contentious. A few for sure, but not that many. But again, this is a fun live stream. If I get more subscribers, I might do more. We'll have to see how it goes. So once again, thank you all so much for watching. I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse. I'll see you later.